The process has been long and arduous for everyone involved.
You are looking at Joseph Thomas McEnroe, a man whose name became synonymous with the tragedy of December 24, 2007. He, alongside his then-girlfriend, Michelle Anderson, committed one of the most gruesome crimes ever recorded in Washington state's history, where they orchestrated and carried out a plan to murder her entire family. The motive? A bitter and long-standing dispute over money that had brewed within their family dynamics. On that fateful Christmas Eve, with hearts as cold as the winter night, McEnroe and Anderson entered Anderson's parents' home in Carnation, Washington, armed with handguns and a chilling determination. They executed their plan with precision, mercilessly gunning down Michelle's parents, Wayne and Judy Anderson, as well as Scott Anderson, Michelle's brother. To add to the unimaginable horror, they didn't spare Scott's pregnant wife, Erica Anderson, who was 8 months along. McEnroe callously shot her, ending 2 innocent lives in one heart-wrenching act. The aftermath was marked by a desperate attempt to conceal their monstrous deeds. McEnroe and Anderson sought to make it appear as if a bloody shootout had taken place among family members. They staged the crime scene, placing weapons in the victims' hands and scattering bullets throughout the house. However, their efforts to deceive police would crumble under the weight of their heinous actions. And of course, it wasn't long before the gruesome scene was discovered by a family member who arrived at the Anderson residence. The police were promptly called, launching a meticulous investigation into the horrific crime. The trail of evidence quickly led authorities to McEnroe and Anderson, who were found hiding out at Anderson's parents' home the following day. Soon enough, the cold embrace of justice closed around them as they were arrested without incident. During interrogations, the chilling truth unraveled. Both McEnroe and Anderson confessed to their roles in the despicable murders. They revealed their motives, which were fueled by long-held resentment and perceived mistreatment by Anderson's family. As the trial commenced, the courtroom became a stage for McEnroe's character to unfold in all its darkness. The prosecution presented damning evidence of his active participation in the planning and execution of this cold-blooded massacre. They painted a portrait of McEnroe as a calculating individual, devoid of empathy or remorse. Finally, after a highly publicized trial that gripped the nation, the verdict was delivered and Joseph Thomas McEnroe was found guilty on 6 counts of aggravated murder. The jury, unanimous in their decision, recommended the death penalty. However, due to Washington state's moratorium on executions at the time, McEnroe was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, even the darkest souls may have flickers of humanity. Throughout the trial and on hearing his sentence, McEnroe's stoic veneer cracked on occasion, revealing glimpses of raw emotion. Tears cascaded down his face as he listened to the heart-rending testimonies of the victims' loved ones. The courtroom was torn between interpreting these tears as genuine remorse or strategic attempts to sway the jury's emotions. Yet, despite these fleeting displays of vulnerability, McEnroe remained mostly composed and detached. He seldom met the gaze of the witnesses and rarely exhibited outward signs of remorse. The defense attempted to attribute McEnroe's involvement in the crime to a troubled upbringing and mental health issues, portraying him as a deeply damaged individual. Jaleel Markeith Smith Riley, a 23-year-old resident of Cincinnati, Ohio, found himself entangled with a dangerous circle of individuals that led him down a path of criminal activity. It was in this context that a fateful plan took shape, ultimately resulting in a tragic and violent incident. In November 2013, Smith Riley, along with 2 accomplices, devised a scheme to steal a car. Little did they know that this ill-conceived plan would have devastating consequences. On that fateful day, Portia Brooks and her boyfriend, Aaron Martin, were inside a vehicle, enjoying a private moment of affection. Suddenly, Smith Riley approached the car, knocking on the window, wielding a firearm. Filled with fear, Martin was forcefully removed from the vehicle, only to be met with a horrifying turn of events. Smith Riley proceeded to search Martin and callously shot him in the head, leaving him severely wounded. In a cruel twist of fate, he then turned his attention to Portia, firing 2 shots that tragically ended her life. Although Portia was rushed to the hospital immediately, her injuries proved fatal, and she passed away 3 agonizing days later. Miraculously, Martin survived the attack but was left with life-altering brain damage. Smith Riley, along with his co-conspirators, 23-year-old Josiah Fauci and Rental Bird, managed to evade immediate capture, leaving the community in shock and mourning. However, diligent and persistent police work ensured that justice would be served. Years later, through an extensive investigation, the authorities were able to apprehend the individuals involved, bringing them face to face with the consequences of their actions. The charges brought against Smith Riley were grave, including aggravated murder and attempted murder. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom became a stage for profound emotions and heart-wrenching testimonies. In a poignant and deeply emotional moment, Portia's mother, Sharon, brought a box containing her daughter's remains to the court, symbolizing the weight of her irreparable loss. Sharon courageously shared a powerful statement, articulating the profound magnitude of grief she continues to endure due to Smith Riley's greed-driven actions. The gravity of the crimes committed could not be denied, and the court rendered its judgment. Smith Riley received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The weight of this sentence bore heavily upon him, leading to an emotional outpouring. Overwhelmed by the realization of the consequences of his actions, Smith Riley slumped to the floor, overcome with tears. Although his reaction showed true remorse, it is essential to remember that accountability is an inherent part of the justice system, and regardless of the display of emotions in the courtroom, the severity of his actions demanded appropriate punishment. Thus, justice was served, acknowledging the gravity of his crime and providing a semblance of closure to those affected. But this story isn't near as shocking as the next one. Antonio Barbeau, despite his youthful appearance and playful demeanor, was involved in a crime that was far from a joke. At the age of 14, he partnered with his friend Nathan Papp to steal money from his own grandparents' house. Now, one might understand if they needed money for an urgent situation, but their intentions were far from noble. Their motive? Pizza and marijuana. Yeah, you heard that right. These teenagers decided to commit a heinous act to justify their cravings. Antonio's great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, happened to be at home when the boys struck. Instead of resorting to threats or negotiation, they quickly resorted to violence. Not only did they use their own hands, but they also found a hatchet lying around the house and decided to wield it. All because they wanted a slice of pizza and some weed. The result? Barbara Olson was tragically discovered later in a pool of her own blood, victim to the hatchet attack. Once the boys were apprehended, they faced the serious charges of first-degree intentional homicide. Despite their young age, the gravity of their crimes meant that they would be tried as adults. The court proceedings were nothing short of shocking. During the trial, the medical examiner testified that Barbara Olson had been struck more than 15 times with the hatchet, with a majority of the blows aimed at her neck. The brutality of the attack was truly horrifying. In a courtroom moment that gripped everyone's attention, Antonio attempted to read an emotional apology but was overcome by tears. His lawyer had to step in to finish the statement on his behalf. In the end, Antonio received a life sentence with a possibility of parole after 36 years, meaning he would be 50 years old before he had a chance at freedom. Nathan Papp, too, was found guilty and received a life sentence, but he would be eligible for parole after serving 31 years. His tears seemed real, and his reactions showed remorse, but not as close as Ashford Thompson. Meet Ashford Thompson, a 23-year-old who found himself in a courtroom for a chilling crime that shook the community. It was back in 2010 when Thompson committed a heinous act that took the life of Twinsburg Police Department officer Joshua McEnroe. What started as a routine traffic stop quickly turned into a tragedy. Officer Joshua pulled over Thompson, who was driving into the driveway of his former home with blaring music coming from his car. Concerned, Joshua called for backup, but little did he know that Thompson had a different plan in mind. In a shocking turn of events, Thompson reached for his firearm and fired not once, not twice, but 4 times at Officer Joshua. The officer, unrecognizable by the time backup arrived, tragically lost his life on the spot. The chaotic scene unfolded as Thompson fled the scene, leaving behind the sound of his actions echoing in the air. When the police officers arrived, They found Officer Joshua on the ground, with Thompson's identification and insurance card still in his front shirt pocket. Joshua had managed to handcuff one wrist of Thompson before he succumbed to his injuries. It was a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who protect and serve our communities. Thompson, in a display of questionable intelligence, sought refuge at his sister's house. However, he was discovered with McEnroe's handcuffs still attached to one wrist and a gun left on the stove. The evidence against Thompson was overwhelming, leaving no doubt about his involvement in this tragic incident. Officer Joshua McEnroe's death sent shockwaves through the community, leaving his family devastated. His wife, Ali Oakwood, herself a police officer, and their daughter Taya were left to cope with the loss. Officer Joshua had served the Twinsburg Police Department for 11 years and was respected by all. He was not only a dedicated officer, but also an active member of the community he swore to protect. During the emotionally charged trial, Thompson realized the gravity of his actions. He shed tears and expressed remorse, begging for forgiveness. However, his tears failed to sway the court or change the outcome of the trial. Thompson was convicted of aggravated murder, escape, resisting arrest, tampering with evidence, and carrying a concealed weapon. The jury recommended a death sentence, which was handed down by Summit County Common Pleas Court. Thompson appealed his conviction and death sentence, hoping for a different outcome. However, his appeal was denied by the Ohio Supreme Court. Since June 25, 2010, Thompson has been behind bars, awaiting the day when justice will catch up to him. But it gets even crazier from here. Dylan Shumaker, a mere 17-year-old at the time, found himself at the center of a chilling murder case. His supposed responsibility was to babysit 3-month-old Austin Dillon, but tragically, he became the sole reason behind the toddler's untimely demise. The incident unfolded when Dillon was arrested and charged with child abuse and murder during the trial. In court, Dillon put on a display of what appeared to be remorse, wailing and expressing his apologies for the horrific events that unfolded under his care. However, despite his emotional outbursts, the judge saw through his act. The judge cautioned Dillon for his lack of genuine remorse and his attempts to deceive the court. Recognizing the severity of his crime, the court handed down a stern sentence. Dillon was sentenced to 25 years to life imprisonment, ensuring that justice would be served for little Austin Dillon. The court imposed a minimum sentence of 25 years, meaning that Dillon would have to spend at least that amount of time behind bars before being eligible for parole. The judge's decision reflected the gravity of the crime committed by Dillon. The loss of a young life under his watch was a devastating tragedy that demanded accountability and punishment. The sentence aimed to send a clear message that such acts of violence against the innocent would not be tolerated, and society would stand up for the vulnerable. In cases like these, where the lives of the innocent are cut short, justice being served is a bittersweet moment. While some may find solace in the fact that Dillon received a substantial punishment for his actions, the heartbreak and pain endured by Austin Dillon's family remain immeasurable. The hope is that this sentence brings them a sense of closure and the knowledge that society stands with them in their grief.